question is that this House do now adjourn. Rebecca Pow.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm delighted to have secured this debate today, giving me the opportunity to bring Musgrove Park Hospital, located in Taunton and serving the whole county of Somerset, under the microscope. And more particularly, I am focusing on the need to replace some of the oldest buildings currently providing care for some of the most critically ill with a brand new £79.5 million surgical centre. At the outset, I want to be clear that Musgrove Park Hospital is rated by the Care Quality Commission as good overall and outstanding for care. This rating was announced following the inspections in January 2016 and in August and September 2017. And I particularly want to place on the record, Madam Deputy Speaker, my thanks and appreciation to all of the very hard-working and dedicated staff across the board at Musgrove and all those who link into it, because without them it would not be the place that it is today, and it's very much respected locally. I also want to thank those who have inputted and informed this speech, including the Chief Executive, Peter Lewis, Dr Sam Barrell before him, Dr Stuart Walker, Chief Medical Officer, and Dr James Sidney. And also thanks to my London team, but particularly to Parliamentary Assistant Catherine Toon, who is moving to pastures new, so this is very much, Minister, her swan song. Also to my Taunton team. So, Minister, why am I calling for a new theatre complex at Musgrove and supporting this bid to the NHS transformation that has recently been submitted? Well, firstly, like so many people in my constituency, I have a personal link to the hospital. Having lived locally for almost 30 years, Musgrove has seen my family through very much. For example, all of my 3 children were born there, and the dramatic emergency operation I went through during the birth of my first child will remain in my mind forever. But thanks to the quick reactions of the staff and the professional team, all went well. And in all the years that have followed, like so many other local families, we have been in and out of that hospital for one reason and another, and we are still doing so. So there's always that personal link with the local hospital that people feel. But that first experience of the Musgrove Hospital operating theatre was 25 years ago. And today, Minister, the self-same operating theatres are being used. But even more poignant is the fact that 5 of the 14 theatres in the hospital have been in use, not for 25 years, but for 70 years. They were built in the 1940s by the American forces based in Taunton as a temporary evacuation hospital for the D-Day landings. So they're still in constant use. They could almost qualify, Minister, as a museum. But they're still functioning. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, you might understand why a new complex housing more up-to-date theatres and associated facilities is urgently needed. Basically, they are not fit for the demands now being placed upon them. And this has been brought home to me following a number of tours of the premises. What I have seen is this. Staff in the critical care unit having to work in the most cramped conditions you can imagine. Tiny, narrow corridors where it's tricky to manoeuvre equipment and get beds round, an extreme lack of storage space. I mean, I could hardly get in there where all the stuff was packed in, and the most storage systems that seem to come out of the ark, dank cupboards, a constant juggling act trying to fit patients in because there simply is not enough space and not enough isolation rooms. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me take you onto the roof. Where I literally have been with the estates manager. Up here is located the unbelievably antiquated air conditioning unit, housed in what I can only describe as a deteriorating shack. And it's so old that on the walls are still notes from electricians about what they did last time. You know, we do it digitally now, but there are little scribbled pencil notes. It is historic. And the sky is showing through the crumbling wall at one end, and they have difficulties in insulating it. This system alone is well past its sell-by date. And in the report produced by the CQC following their recent inspection, there was a reference to the environment in the surgery department, and it stated that the premises were not always suitable, and they noted that some operations were cancelled due to the air conditioning failing in the theatre environment. Just clambering across the roof, Madam Deputy Speaker, was quite a precarious process, crisscrossed as it is with a complex network of pipes. So you can imagine the wear and tear this presents and the maintenance issue, especially when it's cold and snowy. And in most modern hospitals, of course, such pipes would be enclosed. The 1940s flat roof itself, housing the 5 theatres at the heart of this debate, is a key to some of the problems faced by the theatres below. The roof is in constant need of repair to keep it watertight, and this is costly and time-consuming. And I kid you not, Madam Deputy Speaker, water does actually come through the roof to the ceilings below, and it is often collected with buckets. The rainwater comes through. And a couple of years ago, I found myself witness to this as a patient. I had to go in for an op, and they were literally wheeling me along on the trolley, and it was a dark and stormy day, and there were buckets collecting water in the corridors. And I was a little alarmed, Minister. And then, the next thing I knew, I was surrounded by masked figures as I lay on the operating theatre, waiting to go under. They were obviously quite well aware of who I was. But in the nicest but firmest possible way, they drew my attention to the dire state of the fabric of the building and urged me, when I got out, to do something about it. And who could blame them for not taking advantage of that opportunity, pinned as I was to the slab, as they say. But they needn't have worried, because, and thank you, by the way, for the great care I got, it was already in my mind to try and help, because I'd been made aware of this before my election, and I determined if I ever got to this place, I would try and do something about it. And I raised it with the then Secretary of State, and thankfully currently still the Secretary of State, Jeremy Hunt, when he came to Taunton Deane before my election in 2015. And I have broached the subject with him many times since arriving here. So I know, Minister, that it's on his radar. So hopefully, Minister, it will be on yours. And I've got to thank him for his interest so far. Now, at this juncture, I do want to reiterate that despite the challenges presented by the fabric of the buildings, Musgrove continues to deliver the best possible care, with recent intensive care National Audit and Research Centre figures showing mortality rates in Musgrove's intensive treatment unit are the lowest when compared with 20 similar units throughout the UK. So we do not want to worry people on that score. But I do want to stress that the buildings I'm highlighting today were never intended to provide modern and complex hospital care, and certainly not to cope with the throughput that the hospital faces. Moreover, the critical care section is where the most seriously ill patients are treated, including the operating theatres where patients undergo a range of major operations, general surgery for the local population, as well as more specialist surgery for the whole a much wider population. And so the current facility simply cannot provide the level of support required for the provision of 21st century healthcare. And, as I'm sure the Minister knows, demands are ever increasing, especially in a county like Somerset with the elderly population. The baby boomers are hitting their 70s, and Somerset being such a glorious county to come to, people choose to retire there, Madam Deputy Speaker. And whilst they're welcome, the influx puts even more pressure on our health services. And it's a tribute to our health service that, on average, people can look forward to a longer life, but longer life brings with it these more complex medical issues, and that puts more pressure on our theatres. Musgrove, by the way, doesn't just draw its clientele, if I can call it that, from the county, owing to the high level of expertise it's developed, and that's a great accolade to the hospital. Musgrove has become very much of strategic importance to healthcare in the wider southwest, so people come from much further afield for the specialist services. For example, vascular surgery patients are regularly treated at Musgrove, and they come from quite long distances away. So I'm going to put a few numbers on this. The Trust currently undertakes approximately 4,000 operations per year, and this is growing by 5% each year. And as demand escalates, the Trust is struggling to keep up, and this is already having unfortunate consequences that many residents of Taunton Deane and further afield are experiencing. That is longer waiting times, inevitably, and patients are having to be transferred to other providers where it's possible. And having spoken to many people who've used Musgrove, I know how inconvenient it is and actually upsetting if you can't go to your local hospital and you have suddenly to transfer much further afield and you're not near your friends and your relatives and it's hard for them to visit. It puts a lot more stress on the whole situation. So, practicalities. The call for a new theatre complex is not just based on the demand. I've talked about the demand, but there are really practical limitations to the current system that need to be addressed. And this can result, unfortunately, in the patient experience being compromised. It's in no way reflecting on the staff, I continue to add. Musgrove currently has the highest bed occupancy in the southwest, with 90% occupancy most of the time. This compares to best practice generally being recognised as about 70%, so it's really good. In the critical care unit, there are 12 beds. 6 in the high dependency unit, which is located close to the intensive care unit, and 6 in intensive care. But what is needed in this bid is capacity for 22 beds, 18 2 and 3 level beds, 3 being those that require the most care, and 4 in level 1, with the idea to make them flexible so that they can be swapped from one to the other as necessary, which they can't do that now, and that would really help. So, Minister, this is almost double the current capacity, which illustrates just what they've been up against. At the moment, as you can see, it's bed numbers and space that is the limiting factor in terms of the number of people who can be treated, which I would surmise is pretty unacceptable. And as demand for critical care capacity grows, more patients are inevitably experiencing the undesirable situation of having major surgeries cancelled as the Trust is unable to guarantee access to a critical care bed following the procedure. And for the staff, it's this constant juggling act to sort out the bed space, which must, to put it frankly, put a really unnecessary strain on their already pressurised daily lives. And I have talked to them, and they're awfully nice about it, but I do know they're under a lot of pressure. So the new plan also encompasses new facilities for an endoscopy unit, or for the endoscopy unit. There is already one, because the current premises are simply unacceptable and outdated as well. And this is a very hard-working department that I have a lot of experience in through my family having to use it. The unit does not comply with current regulatory healthcare environmental standards and does not have the capacity to cope with the existing demands of the diagnostic screening programme, let alone the future growth that we're likely to see. It's great, isn't it, Minister, that more people are being called for screening? We're always talking about things like this in Parliament. You know, early diagnosis and pick-up does tend to lead to better outcomes. But it's no good doing that, Madam Deputy Speaker, is it, if the system can't actually cope with it? So the crux of the matter is that the long-term sustainability of the complex, emergency surgical care, diagnostic screening services and critical care in Somerset now entirely depends on the replacement of an outdated estate that is no longer fit for purpose. So no pressure, Minister. Bearing in mind the stark reality of the pressing situation, which I hope I've made clear, Musgrove Hospital has submitted its outline business case for a new £79.5 million Phase 2 surgical centre to the NHS Transformation for consideration. And, Minister, I believe the timing is right. It coincides with the welcome announcement in the autumn budget by the Chancellor of the £3.5 billion capital funding for just such projects that will enable NHS organisations to deliver on their transformation schemes, helping to meet demands for local services and deliver a more integrated care approach for patients and reduce waiting times. It's all the things we're talking about, isn't it, Minister? So, now other sites across Musgrove have already been redeveloped and are working well, and the proposed new complex would go a long way to bringing the entire site up to date. The new surgical centre would be placed in a more central location on the hospital site and would optimise proximity to other clinical services. And what it would actually comprise of is 6 endoscopy rooms, patient recovery and clinical support areas, 8 operating theatres, including 2 intervention radiology theatres, recovery areas and clinical support, and these 22 critical beds that I've already mentioned, all specified for their various levels of care. And these new facilities would allow for a better patient experience, enable more efficient working and provide sufficient capacity to sustain services, having a positive impact for the healthcare and care system in Somerset and indeed beyond. There's one other reason, Minister, why this redevelopment is so important, and it's been highlighted to me a number of times in the hospital, and that's the fact that a brand spanking new state-of-the-art facility would boost morale, and it would help to improve recruitment prospects, because I know it's hard to believe, Madam Deputy Speaker, but it's quite tricky to attract bright young talent to Taunton, this beautiful, glorious rural area, but it's quite tough. But if we had this wonderful new facility, I think they'd be rushing to come to take up our jobs, and of course they'd be welcomed. And I've spoken to the Secretary of State about this issue myself, and the GP issue of attracting GPs as well, and he thoroughly understands it. So I hope that this will also be taken into consideration when thinking about the bid. So, in summing up, I hope that I've outlined a very clear case for the need for this new surgical centre at Musgrove. And of course, in allocating funds, value for money to the taxpayer is also extremely important and must be considered. And extensive studies have illustrated that simply, you might say, Minister, why don't you just improve the outdated facilities that are there? But this simply does not cut the mustard. It would not provide a long-term sustainable solution, and it would present very poor value for money. Money spent on basic refurbishment of the existing life-expired facilities can't address the capacity constraints, would not enable compliance with current standards of healthcare provision, or indeed improve the patient experience. Consideration of the Somerset Sustainable Transformation Plan relating to a range of options for sustaining these services for the long term has concluded that the best option is to re-provide these services in a new, modern, high-quality, adaptable building that can meet the future needs of patients as medicine and healthcare make further advances. So, not to put too stark a point on it, Minister, if these facilities are not updated, there is a risk of critical infrastructure failure. And these are strong words, Minister, and they are not mine. They come from Musgrove. The risk of this occurring would be all but eliminated, together with the threat that it might pose to the continuity of services for the patients of Somerset if the new centre is built. Modern facilities will also provide a better patient experience, enabling more efficient working and provide sufficient capacity to sustain services with a positive impact for the Somerset care system. Minister, the good people of Somerset have waited for far too long for this facility, and the staff have soldiered on in less than desirable conditions for far too long. This is the only hospital in the southwest not to have such an upgrade. Should the bid be successful, which I sincerely hope it will be for the myriad reasons I've outlined, there is some urgency towards getting started with this project, because it could take 5 to 6 years, and that would mean it wouldn't be ready for use until 2023 at the earliest. So speed is of the essence, and that would be most appreciated, Minister. And to conclude, I'm sure that the Minister and Madam Deputy Speaker will agree that this is a most deserving case for the 80 million, just 80 million of the 3.5 billion that this government has so in such a welcome way earmarked for projects like this. The money could not be better spent, and the impact could not be greater. The sooner the new surgical centre is started, the sooner it will be finished, and the sooner the deserving people of Taunton, and indeed the whole of Somerset and the wider South West, will be able to start benefiting from it.
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I very much congratulate my honourable friend on securing this debate, and I'm very pleased to be able to join her this afternoon in discussing a matter of great importance to both her constituency but also to her family and to herself, and she very powerfully set out her personal links with Musgrove Park and its importance to the community as a whole. The government recognises the very real concerns which the House got a full flavour of in terms of Musgrove Park, and we are very much working to address the concerns my honourable friend set out. As she remarked, the hospitals, theatres and critical care facilities are housed in pre-war buildings that are at risk of critical infrastructure failure because of their age and their condition. And I think we got a very clear sense of the urgency which she brought to the debate in terms of our need to respond to that. It is clearly crucial that NHS facilities are as well maintained as possible and as up to date as they can be. And in this case, I'm sure she will agree that decisions should be driven by what is best clinically, what is best for the health service in the area, and what is of most benefit to the greatest number of people in the area. And it's right that we address these matters at a level where the local healthcare needs are best assessed, rather than doing so solely in Whitehall. Madam Deputy Speaker, the government recognises that Musgrove Park Hospital theatres and critical care facilities do need to be improved significantly, but due to the Foundation Trust's financial position, it is unable to fund that improvement itself. The Trust has therefore proposed to invest £79.6 million in the development of modern fit-for-purpose operating theatres, a critical care unit and an endoscopy unit. And the Trust is therefore bidding for funds made available through the Sustainability and Transformation Plan capital bidding process. As my honourable friend is aware, Taunton and Somerset Foundation Trust was informed of an unsuccessful application in terms of the Wave 2 capital bidding process, but perhaps it can take encouragement from the fact it was encouraged to submit a bid and to develop its case further with a view to a bid as part of the Wave 3 process, and that is now underway. The latest bid submission process was announced in late December 2017 and closes on the 31st of January. And the Trust is being supported by the regional NHS improvement team to ensure it submits a comprehensive bid. Madam Deputy Speaker, Somerset Clinical Commissioning Group has given its highest priority to the redevelopment of the surgical block at Taunton's Musgrove Hospital. Running in parallel to the process for securing funding, the NHS Improvement Regional Team is supporting the Trust to develop the business cases required for the development of the surgical facilities. And I am pleased to learn that Musgrove Park Hospital's surgical block capital bid has now been submitted and received support in principle from both NHS England and NHS Improvement, and will be considered for the next round of announcements for capital. Should its bid be successful, money will then be made available to start work on a new surgical centre at Musgrove Park Hospital. And I very much join her in recognising often the long lead time of construction work, and that is an area within the department I'm particularly keen to focus attention on. In terms of long-term plans for Somerset Hospital, Somerset CCG is developing a clinical services review which will take into account considerations of the views of patients before developing a series of service proposals, and will aim to ensure that family doctors, community hospitals, district hospital services are all joined up with social care services and provide financial sustainability and high quality care. And I know my honourable friend shares the government's desire to ensure we take a more integrated approach to how we seek to commission our services. The Taunton and Somerset NHS Foundation Trust is, as the Honourable Lady set out, rated as good by the CQC in its December 27 report, and that is a tribute to the staff working there. And it was rated as outstanding for its caring and good for being effective, responsive and well-led. Surgical services are rated as good overall, having been in need of requiring improvement in the previous report. And this follows action taken to address and resolve issues with theatre safety and surgical site infections. NHS Improvement has no significant clinical quality concerns, and there have been no recent theatre or estate-related significant incidents. However, the latest CQC report mentions that inspectors have heard of operations being cancelled due to the theatre environment, and in particular the air conditioning, of which my honourable friend spoke. And indeed, this does highlight the need for improvements to surgical facilities. In closing, Madam Deputy Speaker, can I recognise that Musgrove Park's hospital theatres and critical care facilities do require significant improvement, and I pay tribute to my honourable friend for the manner in which she set out such a powerful case for doing so. Somerset Clinical Commission Group has given it the highest priority in terms of the redevelopment of the surgical block at Taunton's Musgrove Hospital, and I am pleased to learn that Musgrove Park Hospital's surgical block capital bid has been submitted and has received support in principle from both NHS England and NHS Improvement. Should its bid be successful, money will then be made available to start work on a new surgical centre at Musgrove Park Hospital. In this case, I'm sure she will agree that decisions should be driven locally, and I know that that is an area she is particularly focused on. In securing this adjournment debate, Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend, as she so often does, has put the case for Taunton Dean. As the Ministerial sponsor, I very much recognise the importance of this issue both to her and to the community, and I very much look forward to continued discussions with her as we seek to progress this and ensure the best possible care for Taunton Dean and the surrounding area.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Order, order.